Hi, David.
Hi, Sarah.
I want to introduce a topic today that you often talk about, which is channeling. Now, I know because I see the questions that people ask. Some people say, what is channeling? I don't know what that is. Some
Mhm.
people are looking for a bit more information about the channeling and how that works. And some people already know that they channel and they want to understand more about it because it's a topic that's very rarely spoken about. So maybe we can start right at the beginning and explain what channeling is and how would you know if you are channeling? How would you recognize that?
Well, it's, it's such a large subject. So I'll try and be as succinct as I can because if I start to get off topic, you'll have to quickly
Rein you in.
bring me back
Yeah.
because it is a real monster of a topic. Okay, so the channeling that we may not even think of as channeling is intuition and instinct. Okay, we that's exactly channeling, but that's a good definition of it because um, intuition and instinct basically the messages come not from our brain, if you like, they come from our spirit. So all channeling basically starts with your spirit energy, and the one that we are aware of is intuition and instinct. So that's probably the very easy one that we can tick off. But
So,
that
and I'm just going to hold it there for a moment and to make that really clear, so really what we're saying is channeling is receiving messages or receiving
yep,
information. And sometimes you'll feel like you get it in your brain, but that's not where it's coming from. So you might hear some words, you might get the feeling or an intuitive hit or a gut feel that this is the right thing to do. For example, it might come as words, but actually it's not
well,
coming from
yeah, but
your
it's
head.
more no, it's more of a sensory perception, and that's
Yeah.
why and that's why we tend to sometimes not listen to it. Yeah, because
Yes, I
it's
mean, people often say, "Oh, I ignored my intuition," or "I had a gut
yeah,
feeling about that, but I
yeah.
I didn't take any notice."
And yeah, and as I've said before in previous things, it's amazing how the police have interviewed people and said, "Well, didn't you didn't your intuition tell you to get the hell out of here?" And every time they said yes, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So
So let's just have a look at intuition and instinct because my sense of them is that they're actually rather different, and I'm curious how you see the difference between intuition and instinct.
well, intuition, we often say it's what you need, and instinct is more what you don't need. But
So
I'd
there's
have
more kind of fear and survival in instinct, whereas
yeah,
intuition is opening you up to greater
yeah,
possibilities.
because
Oh, interesting.
instinct, but I'd have to say that instinct goes probably it's a spirit mode of survival, I guess,
And
but
protection.
yeah, protective mode into fear,
Yes.
flight or flight mode, sort of. But we
That's
have a lot
really
of
interesting.
but the thing is, we do have a lot of instinctive parts that are a lot more developed once we start to turn everything on again, because it's sort of like once you start to use your spirit properly, which is when we use our spirit soul and we use our spirit heart, and we go actually in and develop them and get them to move. It's a completely different genre then. So
Yeah,
also with
you actually experience those kinds of things very differently, don't you?
completely, but
I
I
don't
think
have the kind of instinct feelings that I probably would have had when I was much younger. It's a very
no,
different experience now.
no, it's completely different. So another form of channeling is also because it's spirit, and we've talked a little bit about this already, is where we get a lot of messages that are coming from externally. So it's from different bits of spirit, and the amount of spirit that is actually just sitting around us is crazy. I mean, it's a lot. Okay.
So
And
that's
it,
when people can feel that they're getting messages from all kinds of sources, and some people are clear about it.
mm,
So, and some people are not very clear, but they just get a hit, or they just get some kind of message, and probably they don't really know where it's come from, but they probably describe that as intuition as well, wouldn't they?
they could quite easily too. But, and that's when, if you're unaware about it, you can probably think that you're getting the right messages when you aren't. So it's very easy to pick up bits of spirit that have left behind in certain places, or but also we can get spirit messages from loved ones, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
from
Which
the other
is
side.
mediumship.
Yeah, it
Mediums
is.
are professionals at getting messages from loved
Yeah,
ones.
but everybody can pick that up, honestly, really. And especially
Yes,
when
I often teach people to do it.
yeah, and especially when if you've lost a loved one from the other side, you're going to get messages. There's no, um, and I mean, you can get it in lots of different ways, but channeling is where also, um, when you go to sleep at night, you go into a different, you use different types of conscious. So you're very, very relaxed. And what happens is, we're actually meant to bring the messages to us. But what happens is sometimes at night, um, due to the fact that certain parts of all our energy fields and conscious and spirit, and it can be, because it's over opened due to stress, um, due to a little, sometimes even a bit to our makeup as well too, yeah, for highly
Mhm.
sensitive people. um, our energy sort of goes out, and it's sort of looking for information. And when our spirit, soul, and heart splits, it's trying to find the combined information that we need to use, which tells us what's important. That's how we find our self truth to start with, when we bring together our soul and our heart. But when our heart and soul split, so to speak, um, they they're not talking the same language, and they're trying to find how to be whole, which means that your energy often goes out trying to find the other bit. Because sometimes if your energy's outside, then it perceives that the rest of the information that you're looking for is outside, but then it can connect to any sort of bits and pieces of spirit that are just sitting outside there, which or
Which might not
energy.
even have they might not have good answers for you at all.
No, and it's got nothing to do with you, absolutely nothing. And then it just, things become quite confusing, or you're getting information that's got nothing to do with you. You know, it could come from who knows where.
And
Absolutely
so what
anywhere.
you're saying is that a healthy, when we're healthy, everything's working well. When we
Mhm.
sleep at night, we're relaxed and we naturally receive the information we need. So we don't actually need to go out seeking for it because it's
No,
going to come to us anyway. But when we're
that's exactly
stressed,
right.
we feel split. In fact, we often
Yeah,
experience
well,
that
we
we feel
are split
split.
when we are
Yeah.
stressed. When we are stressed, when you look at somebody's body, I mean, it's totally fragmented. Your body becomes fragmented, and so your energy is fragmented, which means that your energy drags in information from all these different bits, some parts from within, but also it pulls in a lot of energy from outside, and you can pull in so much junk as well. So
And
it's not even.
that's confusing because you can feel like maybe you know something or you
Mm,
have some information, but you're not sure if it's reliable or not. Maybe
no,
there can be a little bit of doubt in there because it isn't actually a really good source of information, but it's
well,
difficult to be able to discern that.
you've hit the nail on the head there, because straight away it starts to make your self doubt, because you aren't as confident, because there's, like, we all have so many different types of sensory perceptions, yeah. We have so many senses, so that some senses are still turned on and working properly, and then the ones that aren't, can be overwhelmed if they do get a big hit of information. But the ones that are, they're trying to bring in certain information, then sometimes it's very easy for those senses to be overawed by energy or consciousness and messages that aren't even us. And then all of a sudden that's why we become quite anxious sometimes, because we can't get the right information we're looking for, and that's why we get anxious. That's why we get hypo. That's why we get pissed off, and because we can't make sense of the information.
Yep.
And it's why we're having a great day, and then all of a sudden our information changes, and we're not doing it as a whole self. And that's where we need to change things and find out how to make sure that we're all encapsulated in your own personal energy. And then the messages basically come to you because they come through your soul and they come through your heart. And that's how we know whether they're true or not.
So let's have a look. We talked about mediums a little bit. I want to go on a little bit more of a tour of the different kinds of channeling, and then we can talk more about how it works and how to do it well and things like that. So we've got mediums, we've got the intuition and instinct, we've got these various ways. What about people like psychics? What are they doing?
A lot of psychics have very difficult lives because they don't know how to turn their channel on and they don't know how to turn it off, which is why I've helped a lot of psychics and mediums, because they don't know how to turn it on, turn it off, which means that they're basically channeling 24/7.
Receiving information from different sources, anywhere. Oh, okay.
Anyway, I mean, there's some good, I've seen some brilliant, absolutely brilliant mediums who can pick up information and where they've got it from, and man, they've been spot on all the time. And they're very rare. They're really very rare. Really good ones are really, really rare, I reckon, because you can tell as soon as I talk to them, you can tell whether their information channel is nice and straight, or whether they're bringing in from lots of bits of crap out on the side there. So, but yeah, they're definitely going right out to the other side. I mean, right out to the other side, and it takes a lot of energy to be able to actually go to the other side and bring that information back. But
oh yes, if I sometimes people, they've lost somebody, or there's some old story, and so I just teach them to have a conversation with them. But I would always see it as, we stay here. I wouldn't see it as going there. It was like, stay here, ask the question, and let the answer come to us, which is would be very hard work to do it the other way. I wouldn't want to go somewhere else. Like, I prefer to be me staying here. I feel much safer.
Actually, I need to diversify this conversation just a bit, because I help so many people who are going through extreme grief, and it's a little bit like the investment part. So, especially for the group that I help, parents who've lost children, and what happens is, when you lose someone, well, it can happen to anybody, actually. When you're really close to somebody and you've invested a lot of love in that person, and especially when you've, like, even for siblings especially, I think sometimes if you're incredibly close, I mean, I know if I lost my sister, I'd probably chase her to the other side. So what happens is, when somebody leaves, a part of your spirit can actually go and follow that person to the other side. And then it becomes very confusing for everybody. And actually that can happen quite so much more easier than what everybody thinks, which is why we can go into grief a lot more. And that the main reason is because a whole load of us has gone to the other side, and We're not
So you're
whole.
grieving the loss of yourself in addition
So,
to the loss of
yeah,
the person.
yeah. So it's actually both, and then it's highlighted always by then what happens is when we have the funeral, and because that part of you has gone to the other side, you're you're really open, yeah, you're really fragmented, and then you basically suck up the grief of everybody in that you have contact with, and who gives you a big hug. Oh, I'm so very sorry for your loss, and blah blah blah, and you just suck up all their grief as well. So often people have channeled what's going on in other people's lives because they're feeling very, you know, it's often other people are being very close to your loved one, and you actually channel their grief.
Wow.
And so
So it really is picking up energy from all different
yeah,
sources.
it is,
Uh,
and it is an energy. It is energy as much as it can be information. It can be both.
yeah.
Sometimes it's just information, but sometimes when it does become a little bit confusing is, and I've seen it for people who've gone and visited a lot of ruins and things like that, and they've come back with bits of spirit, more or less, that they've attached to,
Yeah.
and then they're channeling that information, and it become, because it's also part of an energy system, not just information, so it becomes a little bit confusing.
Yeah. And let's talk about what we often talk about as channels, which are the people. There are people, for example, who consistently channel from one source. So,
Yep.
and I channeled, so I actually, I tend not to use this language.
Yeah.
But when I wrote my book about money, that was a channeling experience in the sense that I was receiving information that was not my own information. It wasn't written, it was describing things that I couldn't possibly have described myself. And it said it was money, like the energy of money talking to us. And it was a consistent experience. I know that energy, I recognize it. I wasn't going here, there, and everywhere. It was every day I wrote, I was writing from the same source. And of course, the great famous example is Neil Donald Walsh's Conversations with God, where he was
Yeah.
simply kind of like writing. Is it God or not God? We can have that discussion. That's not really the point. But he's writing stuff that he would never have come up with himself. So there's an incredible insight and revelation even can come through people who have the ability to channel consistently from a source that has a more expanded perspective than us, or a more expanded consciousness than us. And there are people all over the world who do this and share their messages. There are people who channel angels and all sorts, but there are also people who channel sources that have names and identities. And it's a pretty interesting world that we don't tend to talk about a lot.
Well, yeah. So you're putting me in the spotlight here because I mean, basically, I channel every day. So,
Yes.
and and that's how I wrote my last book. Um, and it is basically conversational, exactly the same. It's a
But I wonder if
conversation.
it's more normal. I think it's more normal. And like, I agree with you that lots of people channel lots of stuff that's really not
Yeah.
very consistent and useful. But I find, at least in my audience, there are a lot of people who are to some extent channeling really regularly. And that's why I feel it's important to talk about it. Anytime I need some advice, I know that I can go and ask. And people love to be able to do that kind of thing.
I know, and and often the intuition you get at night time, you're basically channeling, and like I know all the really efficient entrepreneurs are fantastic at channeling. So
Yeah.
that's where they get their information from, and that's what they trust, and it's really funny because um, a lot of entrepreneurs I've met are a little bit, don't say, I don't know if scatty is the right word, but they're often they're they have certain visions, but then sometimes they're lacking in a real grounded approach in some area. Yeah, I mean, not everyone is, but I've met a lot of entrepreneurs who are a little bit, because they've sort of channeled how to make something or whatever. It's not just all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. I mean,
well, and many inventions, I think if we went and talked to the people who created many inventions, new business ideas and things, if they talked about their inner experience of it, we would hear them describing what we're talking about here as
we would.
channeling. They probably would never use the word channeling. And that's why I'm being so deliberate about bringing this out, not because I want everyone to use this word, but because I want people to realize that these are normal experiences and that it's really good to talk about it and to compare notes and to say, hey, what are you experiencing? What am I experiencing?
Yeah, and once you learn, that's why I think it's very important to learn how to use your spirit body, how to use your conscious body, how to ground, and especially how to ground, because um, you can pick up so much, you can channel so much, like you can channel what's going on in your person next door, you know,
Oh, I've
because
met people around the area where we live. When I first came here, I was amazed because I met so many people who were just, they said, I'm waking up, and they were starting to channel birds and grandmothers and flowers, and it's like all sorts, and they didn't really have any clue. Every other person was psychic or a channel, or it seems to be in the air here. So I want to ask something, which is the more difficult end of it. Both you and I have seen people who are channeling from sources that are not really positive or good for us, and there are consequences to that. And I think that it's important that people can at least recognize, maybe if they're not channeling from a really good source, what would be the signs? How could they know that perhaps they need to come and ask some questions or change the way they're doing it?
Yeah, if things are very controlling and it's more like a voice in your head that's saying, oh, you should be doing this, you should, why don't you be jumping off a wall or blah blah blah, you know, crazy stuff. If
Yeah.
you're, as soon as stuff that is not real, it's not really sensible, and it can affect your feelings, and it goes completely out of, way out of normality, then you know you can be channeling lots and lots of crap from the other side, because we have what is basically a false heaven, and there's lots and lots of crap just stuck in there, and that's the part that so many people can often channel so easily, and it is just crap. There is so much, you just channel crap from there.
So what is that false heaven?
False heaven,
I'm
it's
sorry,
just
David,
sort
I
of
know
like,
that I'm
yeah,
really
no, so
pushing.
it's just made up of, false heaven's just made up of little bits and pieces of spirit that haven't been able to make it all the way back to heaven. It's not like whole, and sometimes there's some large bits there, and there's can be a lot of turmoil and fear.
Fragmentation. Yeah.
Sorry.
Fragmentation.
Oh, and there's, yeah, and you could, there's a lot of people who've also had really some um over sensualized things or things like that, and it's really weird stuff. I mean, it's very easy to pick it up too, like especially after certain medications, you know.
Would
um
that tend to present also sometimes as psychological symptoms
yeah, I
and
mean,
psychiatric?
we've both had dealings with people who've had ayahuasca. Some have had these, just depends where you've got it from, but we've had some people who've had 4 and 5 and boy, days and days of it. And they, it makes their consciousness open to all, it basically their conscious just goes out and goes traveling. It just goes out.
And it picks up, it seems to connect all over the place with sources that are not relevant to them, but because they've had this very opening experience, they believe that this is really important information that they have to follow.
That's right. And then
and their life is not good. And if your life is deteriorating as a result of what you're channeling,
yeah,
I would say that that's a time to say, hold on a moment, maybe it's not that the channeling itself is wrong, it's that possibly you could find a better source to channel so that
Yeah.
you're getting really quality information rather than poor quality information. It's like
And
just
it is,
going for advice to the right person rather than the wrong person.
that's right. And it's also learning how to channel too, because if you're going out there to explore, it is very easy to pick up a lot of junk.
And also you tend to have the sense that you're losing yourself, which is a
Yeah,
very, very
a lot of
disconcerting.
and a lot of people have, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's that tricky topic. The words that always come to me, people ask me, how do I know if this is real? And the words that always come to me is surprise and delight. That for me, the mark of quality channeling is that there's always a sense of surprise because it's not what I would have thought of myself. It's not my own thoughts. And delight is that it always has a lightness to it, or there's always a beauty or there's an expanded quality to it. It's never going to be at the same level as
No.
I'm thinking myself. And so I always look for those kinds of very simple markers to know that I'm safe, because there's this sense of my soul feels good, my heart feels good when it receives those messages. There's a deeper truth to them than what I could come up with at my own just simple human level.
And it's problem solving often too. Like
Yes.
it often you've been thinking about something and it has a way of problem solving certain situations, and or you seeing a really large perspective of things that most people had never even thought of.
Yep. So what would you say are the gifts, the opportunities in channeling? If we become good at it, whether it's in an entrepreneurial role or you're helping people or whatever it is, what have you seen in terms of really good channeling?
It,
Yeah,
it, it tells you how to be more efficient um, in different areas. Like it teaches you how to be efficient um, with your spirit. It teaches you how to be efficient with, of course, your intuition, your instinct. It also helps you sometimes find different areas where you've been very timid to go, like you didn't really feel like you had enough self assuredness. Um, then you get a little bit of different insight as to how to go about certain things. Um, it can give you a little bit more confidence, I think, just to have a go in certain times. Yeah.
yeah. And as you develop that skill, it can become really a valuable source of guidance. I personally believe that it's really important to maintain, my feet on the ground. I think it's really important to remember that I'm a human being and that I understand, I'm having this human experience, and that I may be able to channel other information that's not always of a human origin, and there's not always a lot of human experience there. So sometimes it comes in forms that are not very practical. And I see many people, I've met people who've dreamed entire businesses, but they didn't dream the timing right. And so they tried to build this business that they weren't ready for. And it was very frustrating because they felt like it was almost like a divine imperative. I must make this because I had a
Mm.
lucid dream about it or something. And then couldn't actually make it because my view is probably it simply wasn't the right timing, and maybe they didn't receive that information. And so I see this a lot in my business, is people who get pieces of the puzzle and they try really, really hard to follow the instructions. And it's usually for something that's going to change the world. It's a really good thing to do, and they feel very passionately about it, but they're missing lots of pieces. And I've found that it's very necessary, if you want to access this kind of guidance, which is expanding and beautiful to do, that you always remember to be fully yourself in it. Not like, sometimes people get this very submissive attitude, and it's like, okay, I'll do whatever you tell me, but sometimes whatever you tell me doesn't work very well for me, and I feel it's really important to
Doesn't
be able
work
to
for
go
me
back and say,
either.
hold on a moment, I'm not doing that. That doesn't work in my life. Come on, we've got to have a better idea than that. Like we need to be, we need to be ourselves and also really be able to listen.
And also we need to be very grounded, because um, if we aren't grounded, we start to see really crazy perspectives sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, it's things that aren't completely logical. So we really need to be ultra grounded, well, actively grounded, with our energy actually moving, so
So
that we
check
aren't.
out the grounding exercises that
Check
are
out.
on this YouTube channel, and also
Yeah,
I've put them actually as a free. I put them as a free download as well, so um, people can put them onto their computer and use them,
yeah, use it,
because it
because
really is important when we're talking about these kinds of topics, that you ground.
especially even when you go to a meditation, yeah, because that's, you can often, while when you go to a meditation, it's very easy to sometimes pick up information that's not your own. So make sure you do ground when you go to a meditation, and make sure that the information then is relative. It sort of makes sure that the information is more relative to you. Otherwise, it won't stick. It'll just
And
sort of.
that's really just because you can be very open when you're meditating.
That's right. That's
There's one
right.
other thing that I think is worth mentioning. Again, this is something I come across a lot. Many women seem to experience this. I'm sure men do as well, but I've come across it especially recently in women, where they channel, I think, a vision of themselves or something that they could do that is really huge and rather overawing. It's like, I couldn't possibly do that, but it's very, very attractive. And so you feel like, I'd love to be able to do that, but I don't have any skill to do that. And, it's almost like I'm not the right person. And I feel that it's important in those kinds of experiences not to reject what you receive, and also not to accept it in a way that is overwhelming, but more to say, yes, I love that direction. And I'm here right now, so that you can give yourself permission to take baby steps along the way towards whatever it is that you have seen. And you don't get into a position where you just feel like, oh, I want to do this thing, and it's too much. It's quite remarkable what happens if you allow yourself just to go step by step, and over time, over years, not over just 3 months. I've got to have everything sorted out in 3 months. Sometimes these visions are built over 10, 20, 30 years, and if you can give yourself that time frame, the world could change a lot with you. Whereas if you're in a rush and you think that it's all for now, and that you're a failure if you don't follow this, many people experience that. It's terrible feeling of failure around channeled information or intuitive information. You're not a failure. Just give yourself permission again to be grounded, and to go step by step with what you can, and don't be overawed by some of the bigger things that can be presented to you, because that does happen a lot.
So if you are experiencing a lot of channeled information, it's also a good idea to start writing, and just sit down every morning and try and get into the habit of actually doing some sort of a written version of what you're receiving each and every day, or whatever you want to call it. But it just does help clarify certain parts, and you'll find that if you're receiving intuitive messages, it becomes a little bit more clearer, and you tend to just dislodge sort of like the junk, so that it becomes a lot easier to interpret than what's really going on. So just give it a try. But you've got to be consistent in it, right, every day, and just, because a lot of the time you're just giving yourself permission to just get inspiration sometimes in certain areas where you wouldn't have had that inspiration, or just a little bit of information to just clarify a certain direction that you may not be sure on. Because when you write, it's completely different to when you interpret, just through a channel, or, well, you are still channeling when you write, but
So it's
it's
amazing you
completely
brought up
different.
inspiration. So inspiration, I guess, is also a kind of channeling, actually, isn't it?
It is.
Probably good inspiration comes from your spirit.
Yeah, it does. Because you're not listening to a physical resource. Usually it's like, because it's often something completely out of the left or right field. Yeah.
Yeah, it just comes to you. Where did it come from?
Yeah.
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 Well,
But when you ask, you can get it.
yes, yes.
I've had like so many different problems. I've been thinking about stuff, and then you give yourself permission for it to happen, and it comes. And
Exactly. Well, that's a beautiful place, I think, actually, to end this conversation, because it almost
Mm,
takes us full circle back to the beginning. And
yeah,
what I'm seeing is that when we talk about channeling, it's rather like it's the technical description of what's happening, that it describes experiences that many people have, from inspiration, intuition, instinct, there's mediumship, and then picking up messages, gut feel, all of those kinds of things, all the way to full-blown professional channels. There's something going on at an energetic level that can be described in the language of energy, and that's why we talk about channeling. But that's a technical description of something that is a normal, common experience for probably the majority of human beings at some level. And
absolutely.
yeah, so I think it's a great thing to play with some wisdom and discernment and good grounding. And thank you very much, David, for it's an interesting topic.
Thanks, Sarah.